Good morning. It's time for the CSLDallas Science of Mind class. My name is Tracy Brown. And every Sunday we get together and we read a little bit directly out of the Science of Mind book by Ernest Holmes, the founder of Science of Mind and Centers for Spiritual Living. And then we talk about it. But not only do I talk about it, that is not a rhetorical we. It really is we talk about it. So as I begin, I invite you to be thinking about your own examples and or the questions you have, because a big purpose of this class is to answer your questions about how to apply science of mind in your own life. Please join me in a centering prayer. With this very breath, I simply breathe into the truth that there is only one breath that is shared by all. There is only one wisdom that is explored and expanded by all. And there is only one love shared by all. Let us go into this time together as one breath, one wisdom, and one love. And so it is. So the month of August, we have had the pleasure, at least for me it's been a pleasure, to dive into the chapter titled The Practice of Spiritual Mind Healing, and to dive into it really as a summary of what had come before and an anchor for what spiritual mind healing is and why it works. And so we ended at the bottom of page 316 last week, talking about what is so important is that the metaphysician turns entirely away from whatever dis-ease is in his or her thought, turn entirely away from that and contemplate it as it ought to be, not as it appears to be like right now, or as it appears to be based on the old stories and false beliefs that are in our minds. So at the top of page 317, Ernest Holmes begins to remind us that there's a technique to this. A person who is practicing science of mind has a way in which they think, starting with the premise that God is perfect. The spiritual system or spiritual law is perfect. Therefore, the spiritual human being must also be perfect. And this is a foundational piece of why spiritual mind treatment works and why we are able to heal through spiritual mind thought, spiritual mind healing. So I love the rest of this chapter because it really gets us into the reminder of what it means to heal and how to give a spiritual treatment for physical human experience. So on page 317, let's just grab the first sentence from each paragraph because it's going to lead us right into that. So in the second paragraph, in the natural processes of evolution, what we call time elapses. 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, 1 year, but in spirit there is no time. This is critical to remember because we don't want to, when we are treating for a change in a condition, we want to be careful. We don't want to limit it in time, and we want to claim it as happening in the present tense because in God, in spirit, there is only now. Next paragraph. Let us again briefly go over what it is that one must do. One must first of all believe. The supposition is that the reader already believes, or they would not be studying thus far. Why must we believe? Because God is belief. God is belief, and belief is a law. And law is what produces form. Okay? God is belief. Belief is law. And it is spiritual law that actually produces the form. So in this paragraph, Ernest Holmes reminds us that first and foremost, you must believe. Believe in law, believe in spirit as a law, believe that the law is always working. That belief is what is the subjective mind transforming what you are focusing on into people, programs, activities, money, relationships. That is what the spiritual law is, what is actually doing the transformative work. So let's go to page 318 at the top, because Ernest Holmes then says, yeah, you got to have belief. But this is only the starting point. What good is the possibility until it is used? And so we have the reminder that we must use the law, not just understand it, or not just be able to intellectually describe it. So if I truly understand it, I am using it, I am applying it in the way that I think and in the way that I behave. And the rest of that page, he gives some examples that if you've not read this chapter before, you might want to dive into it. But the examples there are about maintaining your identity in the absolute. Maintaining your identity in universal mind or the absolute, not maintaining your identity in the temporal or the constantly changing human condition. And when you are able to do that, it really is a representation of what, if you are familiar with our 5 steps of treatment, it's a representation of step 2, right? I identify myself with the universal spiritual truth. And then we describe the third, what we refer to as the third step or realization. This is what is the core of a treatment when we begin to describe actually what we know the universe is producing on our behalf. So at the bottom of page 318, Ernest Holmes writes, no matter what the need may be, whether we call it a physical disease, poverty, unhappiness, lack of opportunity, or a need for love and friendship, we should conform the words in our treatment to meet the necessity of the case, because we are all members of one another. The word of whoever is speaking the treatment will rise through the consciousness into experience. There is a law in physics which says that water will reach its own level by its own weight. Well, there is a law of metaphysics corresponding to it. Consciousness will externalize at its own level by its own recognition. Ernest Holmes writes, we may call it faith, we may call it embodiment, we may call it whatever we will, but there is something in the universe which responds and corresponds to our mental states. Wow. So this couple of pages is that piece that belief is important, it is a foundation, and we then have to apply that belief. And what is happening when we are doing spiritual mind healing is we are recognizing that Spirit, God, the universal presence is all there is. We are identified with that because we have been made from it. And the realization of whatever we want, if we hold it in mind without adding human limitations of time and space or process, the universe must say yes, or as Ernest Holmes says here, again, there is a law of metaphysics. Consciousness will externalize at its own level by its own recognition. It can do nothing else. That is the way it works. So I'm going to stop here and just ask if there are questions or if there are comments in the chat, if there are questions about what I've read. And then we're going to go more into how to give a spiritual treatment. And after that, I'll ask for examples. So, Ryan, if people have questions, how would they ask them?
That is a great question. And good morning, Dr. Tracy. It's always good to be here with you and with all of the people here watching us inside the Zoom room and on Facebook Live. So welcome everyone. And there's a couple of ways that you can have some engagement here with us, and we encourage it. If you're watching us on Zoom, you could go ahead and hit the raise your hand icon located down below on the bottom of your screen. Or you can always put your questions and comments inside of the chat, and we can bring those into the room as well. And then the same goes true for those who are watching us on Facebook Live. Go ahead and put your questions and comments in the chat, and I'll bring that into the room as well. Now, I do always want to remind folks that we keep these anonymous, so in that way we can create a safe container to express ourselves. And so one of the questions about what you read, it goes, if I had belief, wouldn't whatever I am treating for already demonstrated? Isn't the point of treatment to build belief? Seems like he is saying you already have to have belief in order for it to work.
Ooh, that is good. So, yes and yes. So what Ernest Holmes, he doesn't say it's all you have to have is belief. He said that belief is the foundation, that you start with belief. Belief is the starting point. It can't, spiritual mind healing cannot work if you don't have belief. But he doesn't say belief is all that is required. So that's a part, that's the first part. So again, on page 317, let us again briefly go over what it is that one must do. One must first of all believe. And that is a belief in God, a belief in spiritual law always working. Otherwise, you're just begging, beseeching, hoping, dreaming. So a belief in is number one. Number two, though, is you're absolutely correct that part of what we are doing with spiritual mind treatment is we are building our belief in our self. We're building our belief that we can have and we can experience what we want to experience. That's primarily in step 3, realization, where we are making affirmative statements about the experience we want to have or the quality of life we want to demonstrate. So affirmations are what we use to build our own belief by saying something over and over and over again. And in the context that step 3 of treatment is a sequence of affirmations, in that way we are continuing to build our belief. But the treatment itself, all 5 steps of our spiritual mind treatment process are not about building our belief. It's claiming what we want and describing it clearly and accepting it as already done. So that is a brilliant question. Belief is the foundation, but not the only thing. And in step 3 of treatment, the way that we do prayer is continuing to build our own belief in what we want to experience. Ryan.
Yeah, that sounds great. And it looks like right now the audience and myself would like to hear a little bit more.
Fabulous. So I love that the way that Ernest Holmes goes forward in this chapter is on page 319 in the middle. He moves toward the last section of the chapter with a section titled Brief Reminders on How to Give Spiritual Treatment. Now, when you read this, you can read it as his reminding us if we are doing treatment for someone else. But obviously, sometimes the person I'm doing treatment for, in fact, more than any other time, I'm doing treatment for myself. So it's okay to think about it as I'm doing treatment for Tracy, because sometimes when I think of Tracy as a separate person over here, I get out of my own story, right? I'm able to say, wait, this is what Tracy wants, and I can treat for it. So if you are reading along and you are reading and Ernest Holmes says, the practitioner does for a client, then just think about it as, hey, wait, I'm my own client. I am the person I'm doing treatment for. He is not talking about just someone who is a licensed practitioner or minister who someone is coming to for prayer. So, brief reminders on how to give spiritual treatment. And I'm just going to grab a sentence or two from each of these paragraphs because in an earlier chapter, we really already went through spiritual mind treatment. So, suppose when one begins to treat, a great surge of fear comes over them, arguing that they cannot give a good treatment. Well, then the thing to do is to treat this fear as a suggestion which has no power and which therefore cannot convince you that you lack the power to heal. You should say, there is nothing in me which can doubt my ability to heal. This will neutralize the fear and free your effort. Now, some of you have been in classes where we've talked about this when someone says, I've done a treatment, but it doesn't seem to be working. And maybe we'll ask you, so why? Well, this or well, that. Or I did a treatment, but I'm not sure it's going to work because it hasn't worked before. Or I don't think it's going to work because money doesn't grow on trees. Or I'm not sure it's going to work because we're in the pandemic, and so now my options are limited. You may have heard us refer to that as, okay, stop what you were treating for and now begin to treat for the but, right? The thing that's in your mind as it would work but, or it's not working because, right? So treat for is, in this paragraph, what Ernest Holmes says is the fear that it won't work, right? So if you don't treat for that and get it out of the way, then you won't be able to get to the core of what you want. So, as I mentioned at the bottom of page 319, Ernest Holmes writes it this way: how do we know when we have treated a patient long enough? How would one know when to stop seeing him if he were a doctor? When he is well, he will need no more treatments. Until this time comes, treat every day for a realization of perfection. Begin each treatment as if you had never treated the patient before, trying to realize each time that this particular treatment is going to do the work perfectly. Again, a reminder, don't get distracted by the language, like treating for a patient or treating for a client. If I am treating for myself, I am actually my patient. And it's helpful to think about spiritual mind treatment just the same way that you think about going to the doctor for pain in your knees, and the doctor does a treatment, a physical treatment, or sends you to 12 physical therapy sessions, or gives you some ointment to put on your knee twice a day for the next 30 days. A spiritual mind treatment is a mental adjustment, a mental treatment of what is out of alignment, or what has been out of alignment in your thinking. So don't be put off by thinking when he says, who is seeing your patient or treating for your patient. Just think of yourself as your own patient. At the top of 320, does it make any difference whether or not the patient is taking medicine? Not at all. If medicine gives her relief, she should have it. We need all the relief we can get. So in Science of Mind, we don't teach that you only pray or you only take a physical approach or an allopathic approach or a chiropractic approach. We believe that all of it is God operating through humanity in order to provide relief, in order to lay the foundation for a shift in experience, or what we would call a demonstration. It is just that you are doing that work in a spiritual mind treatment with your thoughts and your beliefs in order to align them with what you want to experience physically, mentally, and emotionally. Next paragraph. Healing is not accomplished through willpower, but by knowing the truth. I'm repeating that sentence. I could make that a mantra, and we could say that together for the next 15 minutes. Healing is not accomplished through willpower, but by knowing the capital T truth. Do I have an amen in the Facebook comment chats? Do I have an amen? That's right. So it is in the Zoom chat. Healing is not accomplished through willpower. I am not willing it. I am not making it happen. I am knowing the truth that perfection is seeking to unfold. I believe in it and I align with it. And it is spiritual law that is bringing all the elements together to then deliver the demonstration. Next paragraph. One might ask, is all mental disease a thought held in the conscious mind of the patient? Not necessarily. It may be a subconscious thought, or it may be the result of many thoughts which brought together produce a definite result. Combinations of thought unite to produce definite effects. I forgot how much I love this chapter, the last part of this chapter. So there is a common misunderstanding in science of mind or New Thought in general. It is a very shallow understanding of the sentence that thoughts become things and we are experiencing a result of our thoughts. Now that is true, but where it gets misused or misunderstood is when people say, well, whatever you're experiencing, it's all your fault, and if you would just change your thinking, then that would go away. So some of our thoughts are intentional and we are conscious of them. Many, if not most of our thoughts are subconscious. And so is all mental disease a thought held in the conscious mind of the patient? The key phrase here is held in the conscious mind. So that is not actually typical unless you are like many of us who work every day to put specific conscious thoughts in our mind. Affirmations, our spiritual practice, what we read. But often what we experience is either a subconscious thought that has recurred over and over, or it is the combination of many thoughts. So, for example, at a very simple level, if I have a red crayon or red paint and I add blue paint to it, I'm going to have purple on the paper. If I have red paint and I add white paint to it, I'm going to have some shade of pink. So think about all of your thoughts and beliefs. And many of them are subconscious, but the universe is trying to ferret out what is it that you want or what is it that you believe. And so it is combining thoughts for a pattern of thinking, just like you might combine red and blue or yellow and green or multiple colors to get different shades or multiple mosaic tiles to develop this beautiful mosaic that uses all these different colors. Individually, they are just a brown tile and a red tile and a yellow tile and a blue tile. But when they are all put together, you have this beautiful mosaic of an owl, for example. So think about the universe taking in all of your thoughts and all of your desires and putting them together into one thing. And that's what you manifest. So the pattern of our thoughts is also important. And to complicate it further, I'm just going to mention this. I'm not going to stay there, but keep in mind, your thoughts are going into universal mind. My thoughts are going into universal mind. So what we refer to as race consciousness or cultural consciousness is also at play. So is all mental disease a thought held in the conscious mind of the individual person? No, because some things have to happen because they reflect what is in the subconscious or conscious mind of the collective. Your community, your family, your neighborhood, your CSLDallas spiritual community. So everywhere we interact, there's a collective consciousness that also can be having an effect. So a couple more paragraphs and then we'll have time to hear maybe 2 or 3 examples. So limitation and poverty are not things, but they are the results of restricted ways of thinking. So this is where we can change our thinking individually and collectively to address what seem to be either societal or long-sustaining issues. And then through the rest of this chapter, Ernest Holmes simply reminds us, middle of page 321, the law of mind, which is the medium of all action, is a law of perfect balance. The objective world perfectly balances the images within the subjective mind. Reminder number 2, top of page 322. The manifest universe, the physical universe, is a result of the self-contemplation of God. In other words, humanity's world of affairs is the result of self-contemplation. Next paragraph, reminder number 3. Attraction and repulsion are mental qualities and may be consciously utilized for definite purposes. You attract to yourself a correspondence of your inner values and beliefs. Reminder number 4, next paragraph. Since the law is mental, one must believe in it in order to have it work affirmatively. But it's always working according to your belief. So if you believe that the world is an unfriendly place and life isn't fair, you're going to get examples of that to affirm or align with your belief. So we set the power in motion, and the law is what produces, the spiritual law is what produces the effect. We plant the seed, and the law produces the plant. Number 5, reminder. One should never allow themselves to think of or talk about limitation or poverty. Life is a mirror and will reflect back to the thinker what the thinker thinks into it. Reminder number 6, top of page 323. All is love, and yet all is law. Love is the impelling force, and law executes the will of love. And in finalizing the chapter, Ernest Holmes says, there is one infinite mind from which all things come. The mind is through, in, and around us. It is the only mind there is, and every time one of us thinks, we are using it. There is one infinite spirit, and every time I say I am proclaiming it. So, all right. The practice of spiritual mind healing, and these reminders, oh my goodness, on how to give a spiritual mind treatment and why it's working. Oh, it's so important. So what examples do you have, or do you have additional questions? Let's hear from you.
Yeah, and as always, if you'd like to hit the raise your hand icon located down below, if you're here joining us in the Zoom room, we'd love to hear from you. And as we're waiting for some folks here in the Zoom room to raise their hand, I'll go ahead and ask one of the questions that came through.
Okay.
And I see that one person has a question. So the first question that I have, and then we'll move over to Dennis, it asks, when each treatment adds a bit of different color to the existing shade, how do you keep the final blend from just ending in a muddy brown?
Well, each treatment is affirming the same thing. So I don't think of it as muddying the water. It's getting clearer, in fact. When we are doing more treatments, we are clearing away the mud. We are clearing away the mud by being more descriptive of how it feels. And that's the key A lot of times in step 3 of treatment, people forget what you are describing is exactly what it would look like, feel like, taste like, how you would know it was happening, who is there, what emotional and mental mindset is happening. So if you're doing multiple treatments, you should be honing in and clarifying and clearing away the mud, not adding to it. You're not adding something new or a whole new element. You're actually being more specific of what the universe is to deliver.
Great. So now I'm going to go ahead and call Dennis into the room. Dennis, do you want to unmute yourself and join the conversation?
Good morning. Good morning. Hey, I thought I would just, there's a little book I just started reading. I've had it for quite a while. It's called How to Use the Science of Mind. It's by Uncle Ernie. And it's only like 119 pages. Anyway, Friday I finally read chapter 2 and I thought, it's kind of like duh, but it's very interesting. The chapter started, it's words used in treatment is the chapter.
Yes.
First sentence, all statements used in treatment must be felt with a feeling beyond words, beyond statements and phrases. And then he goes on to explain how the feeling is the most important thing. And it made me think about how, like Reverend Petra, more than once I've heard her explain, you need to use words that resonate with you. Well, that's what she was talking about.
Yes.
Okay, and he goes on to explain this and how, like, he gives examples of how, like, okay, you take an art class, you learn to paint. The master painter can teach you all the techniques, all the strokes.
Absolutely. And that is, that is such a great book, right? That it is a small book and it is powerful. And yeah, it is about the feeling. So we talk about where's the fire? Where's the fire? And it doesn't mean you have to be loud or even emotional. But if you do a treatment or you write a treatment and it's pretty words, but it doesn't feel like you really believe it or feel like, oh, that's what I really want and I'm clear about it, then the belief that you can have it or the ability to really plant it in your mind may not be there. So some of you have heard me say, the fire in your treatment has to be at least equal to, but it's better if it is more. It carries more energy than the emotion you have about what's going wrong or what you want to change. So great example, Dennis. Thank you for sharing that and the reminder about that book. Ryan, who else do we have? I think we have time for maybe 2 more people.
All right, great. Yes, I see someone with their hand raised. Anita, do you want to go ahead and join the conversation?
Hey, good morning. So talking about that fire in the belly and the emotion, right? A week or so ago, there was one day that I was having some real trouble with having muscle cramping in my abdominal region. And it was just really, really bad, making me nauseous the whole 9 yards. And, I couldn't get it to go away. And so I went into treatment. And, with tears streaming down my face, I claimed the fact that there is no restriction and no constriction within my body. And it was just a few moments after that finally that gripping Charlie horse cramps finally released and went away. And I haven't had them since. But,
Yes.
when one starts, I just go back to claiming there is no restriction, no constriction within my being. So just that fire and feeling, I was walking and pacing and just out loud treating, and allowing that fire and that feeling to build in me as I treated for myself. So just an example of that fire and fear.
And I love the imagery that you provided in, as you described that, Anita. So we can all imagine the pain, of cramping in the abdomen, like a Charlie horse in the abdomen, and how painful that can be. But then, as you described twice, right? One, I'm doing a treatment with tears streaming down my face. Or at the end when you said, I'm walking and treating and just like claiming this truth. It's like, yeah, you've got to meet the pain of the physical with the power of the emotion and the belief and the faith. Otherwise, like what's going to draw more energy? And physical pain, I want to say physical pain is the most challenging because we actually do feel the pain. And so we can't say it's not real. Oh, you just wouldn't have any pain in your abdomen. That's not possible. Pain doesn't exist in God. People who are like really at the shallow level or the surface level, just think positive, Anita, and you won't feel any pain because pain is not God. No, my physical body is in pain. I know it is real, like it's data, it's the facts. But spiritual mind healing is saying my spiritual fact is more powerful than the physical experience I'm having now. And we can do that if we can do it when it's physical, we surely can do it when it's financial or mental or emotional. So, great example. Any other question or example, Ryan?
No, I think everybody's spoken as far as what I've seen. Oh, actually, let's go ahead and let Carl talk here.
Okay.
Carl, do you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and join the conversation here?
Sure. So I know we're just about out of time. Enjoying the conversation. Thank you, Tracy. My question is the difference in a spiritual mind treatment when you're writing it as opposed to just speaking it, or is it, the difference? I know for myself a little bit is that writing something, it seems to make it a little bit more real. Something about that. As we were speaking, I was feeling it in my stomach about the writing. It's something I wrote, and it's like it connected.
So that's a great question, Carl, and neither one is more powerful than the other except we make it so. So, for example, so when I wrote I Turned to Prayer book, many of those prayers or treatments in the book came as I was journaling about a subject, and some of them came because someone asked me to pray for them or do a treatment, and I wrote them a treatment and sent it in email. And many of them are like, for me, if I'm writing, it can be really intense. But for other people, writing gets them too much in a loop because they want to edit it and edit it and edit it and edit it, and they lose the flow of it. So speaking a treatment, if I speak a treatment on the platform or someone is after service asking for prayer, that has as much feeling as well, or can have. So neither one is more powerful. I think they both just rely on us using and understanding what we are doing and using and applying the law. Above that, it is simply a personal preference. And I would say for me, it just depends on what the topic is, what's going on in my life. And I will know whether to sit down and journal and write a treatment, if I'm doing it for myself, or when to do what Anita described, I need action now. I need to be on my feet. I need to be speaking it. I need to hear my voice demand this to occur because it takes me to another level. So we can do both. We don't have to make one better than the other. And I'm so glad you asked that question, because I think many people start out writing treatments because they're in class and they get comfortable with that, and they don't get comfortable with speaking it, especially spur of the moment. Just do a treatment. I don't care whether you write it. I don't care whether you speak it. I don't care whether you yell it. I don't care whether you whisper it. Understand what you are doing when you are doing a treatment, which is what this chapter has been all about, and use it. Do it. Write it, speak it. Treat for yourself. Treat for a better world. Treat for the success of CSLDallas. Treat for all things and all conditions you want to see in the world. And whenever you forget how to do that or why you're doing that, go back to this chapter. So we are out of time. So I'm just going to end with the way that Ernest Holmes ends this chapter. All the power there is, all the presence there is, all the love there is, all the peace there is, all the good there is, and the only God there is omnipresent. Consequently, the infinite is in and through humanity and is in and through everything. Act as though I am, and I will be. Hope this is really helpful for you and that you got some insights. And next week we'll be starting a new month with a new section, part 4, the perfect whole. And Dr. Petra will be back. And so I will join you in the Zoom room or on Facebook Live as we continue studying the science of mind with Dr. Petra on Sunday mornings at 9:15 a.m. Have a great week, everybody.